Frank Stanisci, of course, of Candid Frank Live, and this show, CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Radio Network on Zingo TV, channel 250, and, of course, the Spanglish World Network. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on CFL Talk, joining me is David Morassutti. Thank you, David, for joining me. Let's kick it off, buddy.
Yeah, camp is real. It's pretty much the last week of camp for a lot of these teams. So we're heading into this full steam right now.
Yeah, we sure are.
So where do we want to go with first? I think it's very interesting, Frank, because we were kind of going through where we want to go with the show, and I figured what better way than starting with a little juicy gossip, maybe not gossip, but some nice banter between player and former team. So
a little cat fight.
Yeah.
But this one's not among the Tiger Cats. This one's somewhere else. Kenny Stafford.
Not the Tiger Kittens, as some Argos would call them.
No, that's not who we're talking about.
No.
So Kenny Stafford, it's one thing to release a guy, but to go out of your way to normally teams, the worst they say is we're going a different way, right?
Yeah.
That's as close as it gets to we don't like the guy, we don't want him, we're getting rid of him. The way they said it is closer to that version as opposed to the other one where, it's like we're going a different way. We're going a different way because this guy doesn't fit in. What?
Yeah. Yeah. Like some teams, like they kind of like want to send a message because like a guy like Kenny Stafford, that's a pretty notable name. So for fans to hear that a guy like Kenny Stafford gets released, maybe this is the team like making sure fans they're kind of covering their butt and saying, yes, he's a good player, but he doesn't fit with what we're trying to do here. Now, that's probably the way that should be said, but Kenny Stafford's remarks in response pretty much saying, nothing like having your character attacked. That was the response to head coach Jamie Elizondo from the Elks, pretty much saying that it didn't fit our culture. That is damning for a couple of reasons. One, Kenny Stafford needs to know if he's still looking to play. Some teams are going to be like, "Oh, didn't fit their culture. What's the issue here? What's the problem with Kenny Stafford and the way he fits with their culture?" That's number one. And number two, if you're Edmonton, this is a guy that Trevor Harris, advocated to bring in, and we've already seen Edmonton go through a new head coach after Milanovic said, "I'm going to go back to the NFL." They're trying to build up a new rapport with a new head coach, trying to get past a pretty rough 2019, the way it didn't end the way they wanted it to, and this is a distraction your team doesn't need right now.
In no way does it need it right now. I from time to time, get mad at somebody, and the older I get, the less I do it. I say something I really don't mean. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes out of anger or frustration, we say things that we regret. The problem as an organization that does something like that is that I think it's something that the players who are still there may not like, even if they don't like Kenny Stafford. I don't think it's a good look for Jamie Elizondo and the Edmonton Elks. I think it's a bad look for an organization, one of the classiest and most respected, and still one of the most respected organizations in the Canadian Football League, and I dare say in football, period. So, yeah, this is unusual to see that kind of remark come out of Edmonton, especially after a coach that they had who has since left and moved on to Saskatchewan, who, let's just say, would let his temper get a hold of him, and this, this is one thing I didn't expect. I didn't expect the kind of, this kind of talk. Now, how important, and are we putting too much value in that statement? I think it's important because sometimes, what they say, words matter, right?
Oh, for sure. And when you're a player like Stafford and you're trying to figure out what went wrong, why do I not have a job right now? And that's the response. Players take that very personally because it almost excuses in that it wasn't performance based and that it was something totally different. And it seemed to blindside him too. It's very personal, right? If Edmonton were to just say, we just didn't see you as a fit on our offense, you were maybe not your conditioning wasn't there or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's it. In a lot of some cases, some of these teams release a player, but there's a good chance they can be brought back.
Absolutely. It's a small world too, right? Football is a very small world. It's definitely a community, right? And within every community is the kind of stuff that we need to be aware of, right? And one of the things we need to be aware of is we live in a more and more, you can grade it as you wish, listeners, viewers, David as well. We live in more of an accountable age, where what we do, what we say is under the watchful eye of a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. So sensitivity to people's feelings, I'm not going to say aside, because that's what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about somebody's feelings. Was what they said truly damaging? I think it's heavier into the feeling side, because if you're an athlete and you play in an intense sport like football, the last thing that I would let bother me is that statement. I'm just saying, there's so many things that are said, that can be said. And all I would say, if I were the player, I think thinking about it, and haven't thought about it much just for the past few minutes, I would say, yeah, I agree. I don't fit your program. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's what it is, right? It's all about, not letting, personal insecurity, because athletes can be very insecure, right? I mean, how much they get paid, it's not about the money all the time.
Yeah. No, it's not.
But they argue over it. They want more of it, but
Yep.
not always because of the money. It's what it represents, how much they make, where they fit in the scale of things.
Yeah, exactly. Or if they're due a lot of the times, if they're due a certain bonus that gets paid, and they all of a sudden they get released before that bonus gets paid, it sends two messages. It sends one in that we don't want to pay you the bonus, or we don't see yourself enough willing to keep you around to pay that bonus as well. So that's
wow. We're okay, ladies and gentlemen. We're about to take a nosedive we're going into the weeds. I hope you're ready, folks. Bring your slickers, because this is going to get scary. Because this is a new season. The pandemic is hopefully behind us. This is a season where players are coming back with a lot of lack of assurity, right? Like, there's a lot of unknowns here all the way around. Well, from top to bottom, right? And financial questions, because a lot of teams, and I'll put the Argos up there at the top of the list, they're basically going into the grocery store and hoarding, right? And then worry about where these guys will fit in later. Whereas you have other teams that are going in with, well, let's make sure we got who we want, and let's work on the process, not the players as much. Because there is that different school of thought. So personality is going to be a big issue, because character questions, and by character, I mean, when these players come in, we're going to find out how well prepared they were before they came in. We're going to find out how much sacrifice they're willing to make based on a situation that there are no guarantees, right? I think the pandemic taught us that there are no guarantees. Then there are personal issues. You look at what's going on with players who do not wish to be vaccinated. So, when a team says this guy didn't fit into our, very good, because most people aren't going to fit into what the CFL has to be at this point. It's nothing normal. Absolutely nothing normal. So that's why the statement that Kenny Stafford heard, I would have just said, yeah, you're right. Like I said, I repeat myself. You're right. I didn't fit into your program, you lunatics. No, just
but I also agree in that, what, you're, as long as you still feel confident in your abilities and what you can do, I think the last thing you also want to do for some players is have your character questioned, and then put out a statement like that and make other people think that you're taking it too seriously or too personally as well.
Right. Don't engage.
And
Don't engage. And like I said, I was tongue in cheek, right? When I said lunatics in reference to Kenny Stafford and what he could say, I was that my tongue or in my cheek, it's because it's stupid. Like, that whole conversation, in my opinion, is dumb. It shouldn't have been said. That's something it strikes at being personal, and also it creates animosity within the organization. I repeat myself. It just creates animosity.
So, very much so. I wanted to bring up another player that was released, another productive CFL receiver, a former Saskatchewan Roughriders receiver who was released by the Montreal Alouettes, Namon Roosevelt.
Yes.
I know he's 33, which, in the CFL, 33 is not old for some. I thought that was quite. When we discussed Montreal in the offseason, I thought their roster was a little underwhelming in that their offense could benefit from adding some, dependable weapons.
Yes.
Obviously, one of them being receiver, because, if you want Vernon Adams to take that next step, he can do a lot of things on the field. He can, he can extend plays with his feet. He can run with the ball if you need him to. But if you get him some good receivers, that unlocks more, I think, out of that group. And I thought Namon Roosevelt was a good addition for the team for that reason. And
he was one of the group of presidents in Saskatchewan, if you follow what I'm saying.
Yep, he was. No, very much so.
Great players.
I don't think some people in the CFL who watch the CFL really truly grasp how hard it is to get 1,000 yards in the CFL consistently too.
Yes.
He had 2 1,000-yard seasons, and in Saskatchewan, not exactly the most offensive powered teams in the CFL either.
Well, especially with the more defensive-minded Dickinson as head coach.
Exactly. One thing, Three Down Nation mentioned this, and I thought this is crucial too. He led Saskatchewan with 24 catches on second down. So this is a guy who, when you need that first down, you're throwing it to him. Those are qualities that, when I think about certain stats make a receiver look good. Some elevate them a little bit more. That's a stat that elevates a receiver.
Surely.
Now, whether or not this is this performance really well, I don't know. Nothing has been really confirmed in terms of, and this is where you have to talk to the coach and see what the decision was behind that. I would wonder if maybe there's teams that are thinking that maybe there's a decline there.
Yes.
I think that's a little too early to be presumptuous about that. Or again, are teams facing salary crunches? And I think that's going to be a reality for a lot of teams. They're going to be a lot. I keep hearing a lot of tough decisions are going to be made. A lot of tough decisions.
Well, the fact that, like I said, if you're bringing in guys because you can bring in guys because you know they fit, you can bring in guys because you hope they fit. You could bring in guys you're not sure either way. So there's a whole menu of players that you're bringing in for different reasons, and when those holes start to get filled, there has to be a commitment made because you have to pare down the roster, and sometimes I think the big names, the odd big name that gets released, I think probably in football more than any other sport, where you'll see a big name released by a team, right? Sometimes I think in football more than any other sport, it's a message that's being sent to the rest of the players because there are so many players. And, look, they don't have to say, like, let's say Stafford didn't have no, you know what? I'm not going to throw him under the bus. Let's say a player doesn't play or practice as hard as the staff wants. And they see that they're not really ready to play anyway. And then, they basically there might be some, the coach might lose it on a player. And then what has to happen is that the GM has to make a decision, David, right? Because this is a community, right? It's a community. So when you see a guy disappear from a team that has a lot of good cred, it is unusual. And I think as much as it sends a message to those of us that are following the league and ask ourselves, wow, Naaman Roosevelt was one of the best receivers in the league. He was a member of a group that many of them, like it wasn't like he didn't share the ball or needed the ball all the time.
Yeah.
So, I know that from the Saskatchewan experience, he was okay with being part of a group of great players, right? Carter among them. So, we know that isn't it, right? So there's another reason why he's being let go. And the rest of the players, again, this is a message. This is what football is, right? Everybody's looking for their chance to make the team. So when you let go a veteran, maybe there's a couple of young players, and I think this is the case, that there might be some young players that, for quite frankly, at a cheaper price, they're keeping around because they think they got a couple that could take his spot anyway, and then that'll help with their cap situation.
No, I definitely agree. I think, again, if you're able to, as you're saying, if you're able to find a rookie or a guy that, maybe you didn't expect to take, like, sometimes you bring in a veteran guy and you say, okay, we can plug this guy in here. We know what he's going to do.
Right.
But then you always think, you know what, if this rookie, this guy that we don't really know what he can do until we get him on the field. And if he surprises you and he impresses you, then it's like, okay, well, we like the veteran guy, but this guy can do what he does cheaper.
Absolutely.
And it gives us a little more flexibility as well. I think that's the key part, is maintaining some sort of flexibility, because you've said it too, Frank. There's going to be guys who are going to be available and teams might want to pick them up. And if you're holding, if a receiver like Roosevelt is preventing you from doing that, and you feel like you have guys who are capable of stepping in, I can see why that's being done. But at the same time, I don't know if that's truly the case either. I don't know. Like, Roosevelt didn't even get offered a contract from Saskatchewan. So were his salary demands a little too pricey?
We know that can be very true.
Yeah.
We know that's a distinct possibility.
No, it's very, very true. Want to move on to more news? Because I do have more news.
Go for it.
We got to keep the folks at home a little updated. This one's a little concerning if you're a Blue Bombers fan. Andrew Harris, taking part in drills, pulled up limping, and was apparently frustrated. When a player like that pulls up blending and is frustrated, he knows what the issue is.
Oh boy.
So this happened on July the 12th. So it happened a little while back, but Mike O'Shea recently, he then said it might take him a couple weeks to get back on track.
Yeah, all right. So it's going to be a day-to-day situation if we're in the regular season then.
Yep. And this is a player who in the last 3 seasons has not missed a single game for the Blue Bombers and has been the workhorse of the Blue Bombers. There's one guarantee.
Cup MVP too.
Yeah. There is a reason why they won the Grey Cup last year. Their defense was really good, and Andrew Harris kept the ball out of the Tiger Cats' hands.
Yes, and he was a beast.
He was massive for them.
Well, this is the thing, that we're going to find out. You've got players moving around, and you've got a former Argo running back who had a great rookie year, and then not so much the next few years, goes to Edmonton, and maybe possibly, in that offense, Jamie Elizondo is he has done a lot of great things, and he's not, he doesn't have a lot of experience being a head coach. I wanted to talk about the coaches too. So,
yes,
so it's important, the way players interact with their staffs and what we're seeing here. It's not going to be easy.
And the key thing here with Andrew Harris is it seems like also a coach's decision to hold him out.
So you almost got to. He seems like the kind of guy. Love the guy. There's nobody that has more drive than Andrew Harris in the Canadian Football League. One has to be concerned, and this is what you're raising an issue in my mind by the way his reaction, and we'll see what the team does. Sometimes you have to protect a player from himself, and this guy, not because he's a terrible human being, it's because he wants to play so much and so hard that you almost have to. I remember back in the BC days, he did not like being pulled out because of a minor injury, and so this might be a bit of that too, right? And that's not a bad quality. It's just it's like that. It's like the thing that we always hear about hockey. Well, he's too aggressive. Well, it's a little easier to rein somebody in than it is to push him. So if he's overdriving, I'd rather have a guy like that who's overdriving, that I basically said, look, you tweak something, let the trainers look at it. Let's work on it. Let's make sure you're ready for the regular season. You want to play in the regular season, right? Oh, you got to talk to him. And sometimes blind aggressiveness can be an issue.
Yeah, that in Andrew Harris's case, if he's injured, he will push through that injury, and maybe this is
always. But you
can't. You can't,
not
especially
always.
when you haven't played.
But not always.
When you haven't played in so long, too.
This is the other challenge,
right? Absolutely. So, no, this is very true. And if you're Mike O'Shea and you don't realize that, Mike O'Shea, I would say he, out of all the CFL coaches, I would say he's probably he's probably got the safest job in my mind.
Defending Grey Cup champ. Yeah, sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. Right.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So the pressure's not really on him. It's like, it's not like a guy that needs.
And he's a team coach. I mean, there aren't many
player coaches
more defined as a player coach than he.
Yeah. So I feel like, this is him kind of saving Andrew Harris from himself, as you said.
Yeah, and I think that's important, and that's that. It's the way that you convince somebody is important, right? Because you have to. We started the show by talking about appropriate language, right? Words matter, and so do actions, right? Words matter, and so do actions. And Mike O'Shea is a guy that When it comes to actions, everything he does is about actions. In fact, he talked
Yeah.
about when he came back, from the pandemic, he was looking forward to the guys and the hitting and the being a part of that. So, you know, he understands as well as anyone how Andrew Harris feels, because I think they're peas in the pod as far as their competitiveness. You know, and I think they can speak to each other. Now, obviously, the head coach can be a step to the side and look at the situation more of a bird's eye view as opposed to right in your face. Look at the forest, not the tree. So, and I hope Andrew Harris, because there's nothing that the CFL needs more than players like Andrew Harris playing.
Especially as the top Canadian in the league.
Absolutely.
I think people need to also understand that he is probably the best running back in the CFL, but it's his Canadian status that really elevates what he does.
Yeah, ratio breaking for sure.
For sure. I feel bad. We haven't talked about our friend Aaron's favorite team, the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
Yeah.
Craig Dickinson had a couple of comments I found pretty interesting. I don't know if so after the green and white scrimmage, because every team is just going to call it after the colors of the team. He pretty much said that the team wasn't ready to play football.
Thanks.
This was said on July 25th. The season starts on August 6th. Oh boy. Now that could be a coach that got a certain demand and standard he wants, because maybe the team is doing pretty well and he has that higher expectations, and he's kind of saying, that first week maybe they should have conditioned them a little bit better, because conditioning is going to probably be the biggest hurdle for a lot of these teams.
Absolutely.
With the season coming.
Absolutely.
And
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm wondering, we were talking about teams that, coaches that are kind of safe, and many would say Michael Shea fits that bill. Coach that could be has a lot of eyes on him is Craig Dickinson, because of how hard it is to be a coach in Saskatchewan and how much the demand is to be, a contending team.
You could have, though, a great scenario. Like some some may think that Jason Moss going there is basically, the next head coach has been hired. But you could have said the same thing about Paul Police in Winnipeg,
Yeah.
right? And we know how that turned out. That turned out pretty good, right? So Craig Dickinson, if he has the same mental makeup or the same opinion on as far as who you surround yourself with as Pinball Clemens, my favorite Pinball Clemens said, I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah.
I want to bring in the smartest people. So, that's basically, the way it should be. That's called pulling the rope the same direction, and that's called team approach, right? So you don't have to be the smartest person. In fact, the fact that you allow people who are smarter in the room than you are, that makes you smart, and that makes you, that makes you better. And that's what's important, right? Is what makes the team better. And when you're talking about the head coach at Saskatchewan, that's a team that the emotional drive that team has, more than any other team, I think, is driven by the fans. You've got a head coach, Dickinson, who I'm not saying came out of nowhere, but people would wonder in Saskatchewan, could you have somebody with that kind of experience when he arrived, right? Not having experience as a head coach. And he has done a great job. And Cody Fajardo is the other reason. The same thing. Here's a guy who had not proven himself, looking to prove himself. And in Saskatchewan, it helped them both. I think that drive, right? And I think Jason Moss is another addition to that team. I know there's a lot of people out there that are thinking that, one of the surprise teams of this year are going to be Edmonton. Mm-hmm. Because Jamie Elizondo working together with Trevor Harris, and Cody Fajardo, I think, are going to be a right? Since we're talking about players and the relationship with
Yep.
coaches, they had a pretty good one in Ottawa.
They did. And I think, Jason Moss, I mean, look at the team, look at the quarterbacks he's worked with. A lot of them have found success.
Absolutely.
And I don't find it, there's no coincidence that, where quarterback play, especially in the West, is so crucial because you're going up against Bo Levi Mitchell, Michael Riley, you know, and Trevor Harris. You need Cody Fajardo to be at, or you got to elevate him to their level at least to try to give
Absolutely.
Saskatchewan a chance. And they picked the right coach, I think, to do that because I think Jason Moss has done wonders for a lot of teams with their quarterback situations.
Absolutely.
Another one I found interesting, and we hadn't talked about this, and as someone who's watched the NFL, who has watched this player's career, Paxton Lynch. So a former first round pick gets brought up to Saskatchewan. You think, okay, maybe in Saskatchewan, you don't need to sell tickets to fans. They come rushing for tickets. This is a former first round pick looking to get himself back into the NFL conversation. And I found it quite interesting that that Craig Dickinson was speaking glowing reviews of Paxton Lynch after that green and white scrimmage, and I'm thinking, is he the backup now in Saskatchewan? I find that quite interesting considering this is a guy who is new to the CFL. And we always know that quarterbacks that come to the CFL usually need a little bit of time to develop, but it seems like they've just they threw him right into the mix, and he's responded.
Saskatchewan has always been interested in bringing in those kinds of players, but we do know the road from the NFL to the CFL is littered with all kinds of screaming vehicles that have veered off the road. Some have even suffered head-on collisions, and I'm using euphemisms here. I'm not referring to real car accidents. They do, in fact, there are great players in the NFL who, for whatever reason, are freed up from the NFL, decide whether it's by choice or no other option, they come to the Canadian Football League. But too many of them have not had success. Amongst them, a lot of famous quarterbacks. Now, Paxton Lynch is a famous quarterback, but he didn't have a deep history in the NFL. So,
No.
It's not like they got to teach an old dog new tricks, right? Because the Canadian Football League is more similar to college football than it is to NFL football. So if your background is college football, right, there's more of a similarity. So if you're not you're not inducted in the way of doing things in the NFL, the transition from college, that's why small colleges do so well in the Canadian Football League. Our best quarterbacks come from Division II. It's the game. The transition's much easier. And the motivation is much higher because if you're not a first round draft pick as a quarterback, you're going to hold the clipboard for a while.
Yeah. And, good coach, as we mentioned, good coach to bring up to work with in Jason Moss, right?
Absolutely.
This is someone who I mean, doing my research for the show, Jason Moss said that he looked at Paxton Lynch and he sees the talent, but just it never came together. And it's so hard at the NFL level because you get labeled with that first round, you're expected to be a contributor almost right away, if not very close, especially depending on the team situation. Denver has burned a lot of quarterbacks. A lot of quarterbacks have seen their careers go down the tank.
Yep.
I think the good thing for Paxton is that he's open to this idea of playing in Canada, and that desire to play football is still there, which is good. And I know I have a friend who's a Broncos fan, and she's very interested in seeing how Lynch does in the CFL. I also wonder does this light a little bit of a fighter on Cody Fajardo, because he was given a lot of money to be the starter. He is undoubtedly the starting quarterback, but he's also seen, he also wants Jason Moss to put him on, as we said, on that same level as a guy like Michael Riley. And is that a lot of pressure that he's now putting on himself to be that type of quarterback, right? Because he was probably my biggest surprise in 2019 based on how he played. But is he putting too much pressure on himself to playing above what his ability is in some ways?
I think the more, I'll answer that question by saying, I think what's more important is the realization of every quarterback in the Canadian Football League that there's always an opportunity to be the starting quarterback. Football is such a game that it is, let's face it, we saw Mike Riley. I don't know how he keeps standing, but we see what can happen to a quarterback. They take hits, and we've learned in the Canadian Football League. I do not think it's any coincidence. Now, they didn't win the Grey Cup. I'm referring to the Hamilton Tiger Cats, but they got there because they had a great backup when their starter Mazzoli got hurt. So a lot of coaches can say, we want to get to the Grey Cup. You want to win. You got to expect the fact that we're going to have a guy, we hope, who's better than you. We're going to try and find a guy who's better than you. Are you up for it? That's the reality. And, there's certain commitments that have to be made. A starting quarterback wants to know that they've got the ball, right? And that's the emotional. Remember, I was saying about football players can be insecure too. So can quarterbacks, right? But if you're going to be a team player, right, this is the same thing as when we just said about a coach. You don't have, or a GM or a president of a league, of a division, of an organization. You don't have to be the smartest or the best player if you want to win. You gotta accept that you gotta have the best possible group of people around you to win a championship. It doesn't begin and end with one individual. And that's the sales pitch that has to happen for Cody Fajardo. He has to understand, and I think he does. I've had plenty of chances to talk to him. This is a guy who's very down to earth. He calmly is willing to take on any challenge that comes his way. He has the confidence. He doesn't lack the confidence. I mean, you don't accomplish what he did in Saskatchewan in 19 and not have confidence. You don't survive in Saskatchewan because, things can get the rabid fan base there. Things can get ugly in a hurry, So he survived that. So as far as I'm concerned, your point as far as coaching and Fajardo and Dickinson. Dickinson is much like Fajardo, down to earth, a really nice guy, a really hardworking coach, and he's a team coach. It's not about him. And again, I take you back to what I said before. You don't need to be the smartest or sharpest knife in the drawer. You need all kinds. So yeah, I like Saskatchewan's chances with the assistant coach they brought in. They've got some talent and they've got some ability. Edmonton's some are suggesting is the surprise team. You got a team in BC that finished, the season far better than it started. They kept their quarterback healthy, at the end of the season when it looked like he may not survive the season. So yeah, coaching is very important, and the relationships those coaches have. If I can move it to Mike Riley, you can finish up on Saskatchewan and now move on to Mike Riley, and the fact that he needed to believe in his general manager and his team that they would have a decent offensive line, because we all knew, us laymen who don't understand the game of football as much as we think, even understood that you need a decent offensive line. That thing changed, and that's where a coach comes in now, and they're going to do fine. I think the West is going to be a slugfest. That's all I can say. It's going to be a slugfest.
Yeah, no, I definitely think. When I look at Saskatchewan, I think the competition there, they do take it so seriously in that that's the kind of the culture. We talked about culture before. It seems like that's the culture that they've built there. I've always been impressed with Craig Dickinson. He seems to have a good head on his shoulders. You know, as you said, he his expectations are just, you know, maybe they're excessively high, but that's kind of, I think, as a coach, that kind of separates, you know, the good coaches from the ones that kind of struggle. You got to have those expectations, otherwise players need to understand the standard, and I think he does a good job of establishing that. And you know, when you bringing in Jason Moss, and then people are ultimately assuming, oh, is this guy going to take his job down the road? It's the fact that Craig Dickinson brings in this guy full well knowing that could be an actual thing talking about.
At
It
least a
speaks to,
perception. At least
yeah,
a perception, right? So very secure.
exactly. He might not. We know that it's probably might not happen, but the idea is still there. The thought is still out there, and he didn't think twice about it.
No,
Right? He
absolutely.
saw he saw that Jason Moss was out there and scooped him right up. You know, Jason Moss could have maybe have gotten another head coaching job potentially. You know, Ottawa had a head coaching vacancy at one. He could have gone down to get a head coaching down south, but Craig Dickinson clearly sold enough to Jason Moss to not even take a head coaching job, to say, "Hey,
Absolutely.
come be an OC here in Saskatchewan," and that I think also speaks, you know, to be able to sell the situation properly. I think that's something Dickinson obviously did well, because I think Dickinson realized, you know, he needed a guy that can elevate his offense, a coach that can do it and put the offense in place. He knew that he couldn't do it in a way, because that's not his strength. His strength is on the defensive side of the ball. That's totally the school of Pinball Clemens. You find a guy that can do that, so you're not the guy who's kind of managing all that. If you find someone that's smarter than you to do it, put your ego aside and you bring them in.
Absolutely. It worked worked in Winnipeg.
Yes. Oh yeah. Michael Shea was the head. You said Paul Lapolice could have been the head coach in Winnipeg.
Yep.
They wanted to keep him around, and he decided to move on. But you know, Michael Shea, you know, he always talked about Paul Lapolice as kind of the genius behind the offense.
Absolutely.
It was Paul Lapolice that, you know, worked in Cody. Sorry, I was going to say Cody Fitzgerald. Nope, that's not right. You know, when you have Andrew Harris there, you know, they needed that quarterback to just make the right plays at the right time, and that's what they got with Zach Collaros.
You're thinking of Nichols anyway. Yeah.
Yeah,
He
but
made
even with Nichols was always productive in that offense. Chris Drevler, who many thought wasn't a great quarterback, you know, with his arm, but did the other things. Paul Lapolice made Chris Drevler an NFL option,
no
right?
kidding. No
So,
kidding.
you know, and you know, Michael Shea was on an expiring deal when he won that Grey Cup,
That's right.
right?
And
So
and,
that
and they could have, you know, Winnipeg didn't get to the Grey Cup without stumbling.
no,
Right? They stumbled quite a bit a few years back, and
they
there
had
was
the
a
heart.
lot of talk that, you know, let's put Lapolice as a head coach because this isn't working.
They had at one point, you know, the people forget they had to go through Calgary and Saskatchewan to get to the Grey Cup. It's not an easy road when you don't have that first round bye. That's not an easy road for teams, and
Absolutely.
Winnipeg was able to get there. They were able to, because while they might have stumbled at one point, they were able to get it going at the right time, and that's coaching as well. Coaching is making sure the players are ready for the situation.
Yeah, and it's good that you said that, and it's also you can't win with just an offense. You can't win with just a defense. You
No.
got to have, and then there's special teams. The Canadian
Which is Michael
football,
Shea's
yeah,
specialty.
exactly.
That's what he got brought into coaching to do.
Exactly. And so, you know, and he had the defensive desire, right? That was, you know, as a linebacker, he understood defense very well. The point being, though, that you see, you can have a great offense or you can have a great defense. If you're Saskatchewan and now you're a head coach and you're going, I can get a guy who can really ramp up my offense. Yeah, I'll take him. I'll bring him in here because at the end of the day, what you're talking about is winning the Grey Cup. You've got to share the limelight. You got to share if nothing else, a head coach has to delegate authority. And you want to delegate to people you can trust with that authority. And Jason Moss can be trusted with an offense. That's a positivity.
Oh, that's for sure. I expect big things out of Saskatchewan if they can get that offense elevated. Because I
I
feel
think
like,
they will.
because I always look at Calgary as the standard in the West because they do both very well. That's what it's all about.
Have done both very well forever, right? You
Yeah.
get a quarterback that can be the centerpiece to your offense, an offensive plan, and receivers, and of course the players that can execute a great offense. And then you have a defense with the stars that have passed through Calgary. It's been an assembly line of greatness. NFL players, future NFL players have gone through Calgary. So, they know what they're doing on the coaching side. And the coaching side has to do with not ego, but working together. And Calgary had Dickinson there, right? He went on to Ottawa to do great things. So, and they're building from within. The guy that takes over from Dickinson was there and he stayed there. And now he's continuing the tradition. They've lost some really good assistant coaches. We saw one that didn't quite succeed in BC. Yeah. We didn't see him succeed, but another great coach, and I think I don't know if he's going to turn up. I don't know whether he's just going to sit on his contract, but he goes along with Jason Moss. I think they both, Moss and Claybrooks, I think, took a heavier hit for the failures of their teams than they deserved. And I'm looking forward to seeing him. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack, but I have this great affinity to Claybrooks. I love the guy. I love talking to him. At the last Grey Cup was fun talking to him. Not a bitter bone in his body. A real team player and a big man. I mean, aside from his size, I'm talking about his heart. But okay.
Yeah, I know he's been kind of outside of football the last little bit, from what I remember, and maybe that's something for Claybrooks, who had to choose between, I think, the BC job. I think the Dallas Cowboys offered him an assistant job, and
They did.
You mentioned, coaches like that head coach. The head coach always looks a little more appetizing because you're the general, you run the floor, and
you the man.
Yeah, whether you like it or not, whether it's fair or not, you are the guy, and it was very unfortunate that it didn't work out for him. Maybe it was a little too early to pull the shoe, but BC also had very high expectations and a quarterback that they expected, when you bring in Michael Riley and that's the guy and then you bring in this, up and coming head coach. There was a bunch
of less than totally experienced assistant coaches.
Exactly. Right. So, yeah, I think, maybe this is the case where maybe he was a good head coach and he just didn't have the right people around him, or just the guys he brought in it just didn't work out. I mean, I look at Toronto when Dinwiddie was hired by Pinball. Pinball was a head coach at one point. He knows what he's looking for in a head coach as a general manager. And he just seemed the qualities that Ryan Dinwiddie brings. Pinball just seemed, he was very quick to bring up all those qualities that he liked from Dinwiddie. And again, another guy that came from the Calgary coaching tree. And Dinwiddie's brought in some veteran guys. He just brought in Rich Stubler to be a consultant on defense. This is he's brought in some.
We've seen him in Toronto a few times.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's been every CFL team has seen Stuber at least a couple of times, but like he's brought in some veteran guys with a lot of experience because he doesn't have a lot of experience. I feel like that usually if you're a head coach, that should be the way to go if you're, trying to get off on the right foot and you have those people to lead. I mean, he also has Pinball to lead on because Pinball was a head coach.
Absolutely.
One of the Ben Grant, who I've been trying to get on the show, he's a little bit. He's actually been going to Argos practices, and he was saying that seeing Pinball at practice, but not stepping over the coach's toes because the GM would like to have his say on stuff. He seems to be having fun, bring that energy that we know Pinball can bring. That I think is such a valuable tool for a guy like Dinwiddie to have because I think nobody can fire up a team like Pinball. Nobody can has a great football mind. He's a great football mind too. So that's such a benefit to a young coach.
Absolutely.
And yeah, that Calgary coaching team just continues to surprise me. I think they're a team that you always say, "Oh, how long can it last? How long can it last?" It's been lasting a lot longer than people in the West would like it to last.
Yeah, and
Because
it's gonna carry on. There you want to talk about a coaching tree. Um, they're the stump, like they're well. Anyway, they're where
how
everything grows from.
started it all.
Yeah. So Calgary. When you talk about Calgary coaching, really, the coach is a big part of it, but it's the organization too. And again, this takes us back to what we said before.
Yeah.
You've got a coach there, a head coach who doesn't mind being around really intelligent coaches, and has the security of knowledge that he's safe. It doesn't matter to him. He's a part of the team, and everybody gets their credit, everybody gets their blame, but it really doesn't matter. What matters is the team. And this is why organizations like Calgary continue to produce really good teams because they're just team oriented.
Yeah.
I like what you said about Pinball. He's there. Pinball doesn't really. I mean, when I see him, I haven't had a chance to be at practice. I have my reasons, and none of them are bad. Just life in general is getting in the way. But what I can say is that Pinball isn't the type to show anybody up, and in fact, he will be always. I think even in this position, what I've noticed at the short time that he was in this position before the pandemic, is that he's always about promoting the team. He's not worried about how the coaches are behaving publicly. You don't see that kind of stuff from Pinball, and
No.
he's a team player as well, and he's a guy who's a good example of leadership. He's human, which makes him not perfect, but that's why it's important that you don't need to be the smartest person in the room.
And I think it also shows in the CFL how great the coaching tree is and how a lot of these teams, like you look at all the CFL teams, there's some pretty good names for head coaches out there. Like
Orlando Steinauer, you want to talk about him?
Oh, I mean,
Right?
we have a couple of minutes.
And you know what? Him and Kahari Jones,
Yeah.
same as far as I'm concerned, same kind of guys. Very heady, very motivational, and guys who really set the stage of what happens in football using life examples to do it.
And guys with a lot of CFL experience.
Tons.
Experience at the CFL level. Like, I think that's such an underrated factor that both of them bring is they know how to succeed in the CFL because they've lived it, they've breathed it. They know what these players, they can relate so much more to these players than I feel like a lot of some of the other coaches do because some of these coaches haven't played the CFL level. They all bring different experiences, but I think, as you said, Kahari Jones and Orlando Steinauer. I mean, when the Argos needed a head coach after Mark Trestman, I said, "Ooh, could Orlando Steinauer be a guy?"
Oh, no kidding.
But Hamilton did a good job to ensure that wasn't the case.
Absolutely. Well, David, we've run out of time. I just want to get those last two coaches in there.
Yeah, very,
talk about. Just
very
get it in
fair.
the last couple of seconds. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Frank.
He's David Morassutti. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk on Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Candid Frank. He's David Morassutti. Next Monday. Football's almost here. Another week and a half. Take her away, Rebecca.